Alright guys, Kremp again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The final pieces falling into place in this Rostermania cycle with two big updates last night. The Falcons, but also the Minnesota Rokkr potentially rounding out their team. Over the last few days, there's been lots of drama about Kenny, where he might potentially go. Could it be the Ravens? That then fell through for various reasons, but it seems like Minnesota, with the potential that seems to be inherent in that team, maybe looking at Kenny to round out their roster over the next couple of days. And no prizes for guessing who Rokkr play their first game back on Friday. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Starting here, we got the Surge card, second at the tournament, of course. Neptune with a 95 overall for the stage. Their hardpoint was actually incredibly good. 21 in 8, which is, better than most, that's certainly for sure. Control was pretty up and down, and Search and Destroy was where maybe they can get a little bit better, honestly. If Surge's Search gets a bit better, they would be a force. It's also going to be difficult to maintain that kind of hardpoint performance, but if you look at the numbers, Neptune 99 overall in the damage per 10-minute category from an SMG. Abuzah had a great stage as well. Again, you know, his card isn't that dissimilar to Beans's in some ways, when his, KD is basically a 1. But in terms of damage, he's right up there. And also his hill time and ticks per round. Abuzah's been a really great control player, and also in terms of objective work in general this season, that gives Abuzah a nice buff. Nastie's been phenomenal for this team, I think, as well. An 04's card ends up at a 75 just because of, there's only so many kills to go around, but I still think he was super impactful on the LAN environment. So I don't think that card, I don't think the numbers fully do him justice, but there's only so many kills on the board when your team are slaying out this hard in hardpoint, right? But his Search and Destroy has also, as always, been really good. 04, his decision making continues, I would say, to impress. This was a big update of yesterday as well, and Kaysen actually mentions not exactly this, but he said that he was cooking up something. We had a quick little chat at the Major in Dallas, and he said that he had big plans for the season. It was something he really wanted to do. And I was like, okay, it sounds kind of interesting. And yesterday he decided to put it out there, right? So as he says, normally I keep things I'm working on private, but my next cool event I want to make happen is MLG Anaheim next season. Don't get me too excited. It's expensive, it's not easy, but I'm gonna do my best to make it happen. Maybe COD and Halo, we'll see. Same setups, same everything. I'll try my best. So Anaheim is, no doubt the most legendary event in the history of competitive Call of Duty. It's pretty funny how the pictures that he attaches are not pictures of the actual event itself, but the pictures of the Hilton bar. So the Anaheim Convention Center, you run down from there, you have the Marriott on the left-hand side of the Boulevard, I think they probably call it, and on the right-hand side you've got the Hilton, slightly closer to the venue. This is the lobby, this is the bar, and, many a conversation and many a player has been dropped and picked up at this bar over the years. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Anaheim event back in 2019, but it's not happened since then, and there were plenty of Anaheim events in years past which were legendary for sure. There was a rumor Anaheim was going to happen again this most recent season as the kickoff event. It wasn't quite going to be in the same way that it previously was, but it was a possibility. That then never happened. Now, how exactly would this work is a question, right? Because typically the league, or let's say a team, hosts the event. So if Kaysen says, okay, I want to run Anaheim for COD and Halo, how's it going to work? Could he partner with someone like DreamHack? Obviously, Adam Apicella's kind of running the show over there now. That's what they're doing with COD and Halo, among other things, in Dallas in May, which is where the Call of Duty Major is going to be. Is there a partnership with the CDL and HCS that makes some sense to make this happen? I'm not so sure, but, great idea, obviously. If Kaysen could somehow pull this off, it would be absolutely insane. Scrappy says it would be so fire, and, look, he continues to put on great stuff for the esports community, and it's great to see it as Claces get the gang back together. We're going to Anaheim. So, we'll see how this goes. Like, I'm not going to get my hopes drastically up, but, I don't know. If I can help in any way to make this happen, I'm going to try and do so. Thought this is a pretty funny reply from Claire as well. He says, I've been banned from that bar 3 times. Wonder if I can get away with a 4. So we'll see about that one. But let's talk about Rostermania. Johnny is in Dallas. We saw that the other day. We think he's going to Gentlemates. I don't think they've officially confirmed that, though, as of yet. Arcees drops the quad question mark in the replies or in the quote tweets because we're pretty sure that Arcees is also coming back into the league. And we think it's going to be with the Vegas Falcons. Now, the other day, Priester was benched by the Gentlemates guys. And it seemed to many, including myself, okay, where's Priester going to go next? We even discussed it. Is it worth playing challenges? Does he have still enough stock, let's say, to stick out the season, come back next year, get an opportunity? Because that's what I find very interesting about this Kenny thing in a second, is that Kenny doesn't necessarily need to come back at all this year. He could wait it out. Priester, should be taking any opportunity that comes his way, I would say, to stay in the league. And, well, that certainly seems to be arriving in the form of the Vegas Falcons. So, over the last couple of days, the story has changed to some degree. As I said, it was always going to be Pred, as far as I'm aware. Xnib was going to stay. Obviously, I guess they would hope that they could get kicks back at some point, but that doesn't seem especially likely right now. Thieves won the most recent Challengers event, 2-time world champion, lots of experience. But maybe there's a feeling that someone like him on the team helping out Xnib could be massively beneficial. There's also a prior relationship there with Astes and Clayster, so maybe that makes a fair bit of sense as well. But they needed a fourth player, right, in that kind of flex role, and there were a couple of options and names thrown around. The big one really over the last couple of days was actually Prolute. Prolute was considered to be in the conversation too. He'd done well in challenges recently, and, well, I'm not exactly sure why they've moved on from Prolute. There's been some speculation on it, but I think the Prolute was definitely an option that they were going for, and maybe that was quite close to being done. But for whatever reason, they've decided to move on from that, and Priester is now going to be the target instead. So, look, there were maybe other options out there on the flex role, but they wanted somebody with some experience, and Priester seems like a sensible option at the time. Is the team going to be any good? I think that's the big question, right? As and when it gets confirmed, of course, we'll talk about it in some greater detail. Look, cool to see Pred back, if this is true, and I think it probably is. How is Pred and Xnib going to work together? Big question marks, I think, really, because obviously Pred and Shotzzy in this game weren't really working. Pred is, not eager at all to run a flex. I mean, if he wanted to do so, he probably would still be at OpTic to the present day, potentially anyway, if they'd agreed to make that kind of change. RCT's coming back in as the main ER. Look, there's obviously going to be some controversial pickups here. I don't think anyone's really doubting the Pred move. Of course, look, Pred maybe it's not exactly going to be perfect, right? We know that on OpTic recently it wasn't ideal over the last few months, but I don't think anyone's doubting that getting Pred is a good idea for the Falcons, really. Incredibly talented player, star player for the future. It just makes an awful lot of sense. It's the ARs that are raising the questions, really, because, of course, Astes has been out of the league for a little bit of time. Yes, he's cooked up in challenges lately. Is that enough to justify bringing him back in? I think they do need some sort of veteran experience and leadership here. So one of these two guys, I think, makes a fair bit of sense. Whether you want both of them, I don't know. There's obviously been some speculation on how this team is going to perform, and most people are probably saying, yeah, not so convinced they're going to make a serious run. At the end of the day, they're not necessarily trying to make champs. I mean, I guess technically they are, but if we have a look at the standings here in the league, it's not exactly looking pretty, right? They're at 0 points. Currently 8th place is at 100 points. So, Falcons need to overhaul a lot of teams if they want to make it to the World Championship this year. They're starting out from 0 in 18, 9 in 54 bagger map counts. So, an event win is 100 points. So technically, if Falcons win both remaining events, even if they win none of the qualifiers, 200 points is going to be enough to make champs. So it's not over till it's over, baby. But the reality is that, yeah, there's no real chance. They will be looking to win some series, I guess, and therefore also to look good for the World Cup. I think that's probably the key point, really. So, I'm not saying there's going to be a massive amount of patience for Falcons, because obviously they're spending good money to make this team happen, so they're not going to be patient, but they will probably accept, okay, champs this year is probably off the radar. Let's go for the World Cup and try and form the most competitive team we can by then. So this team has some time to work with, I think, is the bottom line. But if they don't perform, if they're not that much better than the previous roster, which surely they will be, but, maybe not drastically so, then there are going to be some questions on the matter raised. But let's talk about what I consider to be the real big deal of the day, and that is Kenny potentially to the Minnesota Rokkr. We talked about this over the last few days. Kenny had an offer from Rokkr very early on, I think, in this Rostermania cycle. They were saying to Ken, yeah, we're getting rid of Paul. Do you want to come here? Now, it seemed like Ravens, though, wanted him as well. And if you're Kenny and you get the option to choose either Ravens with Slasher, TJ, and Gwyn, or you get to choose, Minnesota with Nero, Estriel, and, of course, Geo, I think it's pretty obvious what you probably want to go for in that circumstance. I think that Kenny was willing to join Carolina if the numbers made sense for him, and also if the numbers made sense for Carolina, because you know, we think they had to pay a little bit of money, not much at all, but some money to OpTic to get him out of his contract, which still exists. I mean, it's not like he's on the bench on OpTic or was on the bench on OpTic. It's simply that you can't terminate players immediately, obviously, because that would be horrific job security. So there's always a bit of a termination period where if another team wants the guy, they have to pay a little bit of money. That's what OpTic looked for. Ravens were apparently unwilling to do so. And, you know, as I said the other day, you can debate the merits of that decision, but it doesn't look like Ravens are going to benefit from this at all because their team chemistry is probably going to be completely shot, given that they know that they were trying to drop Vivid. But I think if you're Kenny and you get the Ravens offer and it makes sense, I think you go there 100%, no real doubt in my mind. The question for me is that Kenny has decided to come back, we think, with the Minnesota Rokkr. Because I think you can very much argue, if you are Kenny, maybe this just isn't really your game. Do you come back to Rokkr at all? They're a team that, as we just saw a couple of seconds ago, they're currently 10th in the CDL standings. They may not make it to the World Championship. As it stands, I'm expecting Heretics probably to drop down. But, you know, apart from that, Cloud9 I'd expect to go up. Rokkr, I mean, they're kind of in no man's land, really, especially with the way their team currently is. Boston, I think, are definitely good enough to make it. The top 5 are not going anywhere. And then you've got OpTic in the mix as well. So, you know, it's a big challenge, I think, to go into Rokkr right now, especially when you've got a team of 3 who are obviously incredibly talented players. But look at their recent results. I know they've played good teams, but their recent results have not been pretty. Estriel's been very good. Gio's been very good. But if Kenny wasn't very happy about some of the plays that Huke was making, some of the plays maybe that Pred was making on the map in recent times, is he going to be happy watching Nero go like incredibly rogue? I mean, it's going to be a challenge, right, for Kenny to get on top of that. So I think that's what I find interesting here is that Kenny's actually, we think, decided to do this. It's a no-brainer for Rokkr, I think, because they needed some leadership and some experience and someone who can help drill their players how to actually use their talent for winning cards. Makes perfect sense, I think, for Rokkr to look for Kenny. But if I'm Kenny, you know, it's interesting for me that Kenny said, you know what, yeah, I actually do want to still compete this season, and even to such an extent that I'll go to a team like Minnesota that are not right now in an excellent position at all. I think it shows to a great degree that, like, whatever was happening at OpTic was just untenable for Kenny. Like, Kenny just really didn't want to be there. It's not like he didn't want to play. You know, I was genuinely worried after the whole Kenny got dropped thing. Was like, damn, is Kenny going to come out at Major 2? Is he going to retire, right? Like, has he really just had enough of playing cards? Because it seemed like he didn't want to be there on OpTic. You watch the player cams, you watch the, you know, the podcast. It didn't seem like Kenny really wanted to be there. And I was somewhat concerned that was going to mean the end of Kenny as a player. But clearly he really does want to play. Like, he's really keen to compete and, you know, continue on the legacy that he's built. He just really didn't want to be on OpTic, right? Like, and that's kind of my key takeaway from this, if it happens. As I say, if it gets confirmed, we'll discuss how good the team might be, some of the issues, some of the pros and the cons, but I'm more interested in it from the Kenny perspective, because what was going on at the OpTic camp, right? People are going to speculate to no ends with, because it felt like when he did the stream, where Huke got dropped shortly afterwards, that Kenny was like, oh, this Huke guy, I don't like playing with him anymore. And maybe that's true, maybe that wasn't, who knows. But Pred obviously comes back in and things were clearly problematic. It just, I'm not sure that Kenny and Pred have massive issues outside of the game, but I think there's really no doubt at all that in the game there were big problems there between the pair of them. And the absolute cinema piece about this is that in a couple of days, on the 4th of April, Minnesota and OpTic's first game back of the stage is against one another. So Kenny playing OpTic is looking to like it's going to happen again, much sooner maybe than we might have expected. And this is going to be a fantastic time to keep an eye on, because Kenny has been dropping generational, like, horrific performances on OpTic for some time. I know that there's a feeling among OpTic fans that, like, oh my god, is Kenny going to be back? Like, is he going to turn up in the series? Look, I don't really think this is Kenny's game, but I do think that in an environment that he actually seemed like he wants to be in, and, you know, maybe it makes a bit more sense for Kenny playing with some new players, I don't know, but it's a mega series, and of course, even in the grand scheme of the World Championship, it could be a mega important series in terms of even qualifying for the Minnesota Rokkr. Every 10 points that they can accrue is a massively big deal right now. So Jake Hell says, this has been close now for a couple of days. Looks like it's going to be finalized soon. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.